do as a brakeman?
As a brakeman?
Yeah.
Well, we get into this thing of what does anyone do? I mean,
Yeah.
you have a great many duties.
Okay.
Now, of course, a brakeman on a through freight used to, as I think I said a while ago, that he would make a check. No, I was just telling you at the table that back before, long before computers, why, when you got to be a conductor, you had a badge. Your badge you carried in your hip pocket. It was called the book. And I don't know, some people around anymore, you'd think everybody would know about the book. And well, it might even be put in capital letters. But they don't. Now, the book was kind of the badge of a conductor. And if you had a conductor, somebody had just been promoted to conductor, for instance, and he would rather work on a lousy job as conductor than a real good job as a brakeman, kind of because amount of hubris and egotism, why, they would say he was book happy. But the book was really a legal document and had to be kept for 7 years. And in it, the conductor had, a while ago he asked me what a conductor did. Well, this was one of the things. And the conductor had to keep in this book a complete list of his train. I mean, every car had to be listed, its initial, its number, and contents, destination. Sometimes some of the contents could be left out, but definitely, absolutely even, by the initial number and the destination of the car. And so quite a little bit back when they used to have more than 2 men on a crew, why they had a conductor and 3 brakemen, and sometimes, I think I mentioned this before, on about 4, 5, 6 brakemen. That was very unusual, and that was generally only in California on grades. But the swing brakeman had a job to do on through freights, in that before the train left the yard, he made a tab and made a check of the train. In other words, he put down the initial and number of every car starting at the caboose until they got down to the engine. And then he would roll the train out, and at one time, when flat spots were more prevalent than they are now, why, he would check off his list, he would check every car that had flat spots. And so then when they got back on the caboose, why, then they would make out a form the conductor would throw off at the first telegraph office he went by, listing these. And that way, why, when it got in, why, if a car was found with flat spots and it had been listed on this telegraphic form, why, then they couldn't blame that particular train crew for it. But once in the caboose, now I'm speaking of the SP up until who knows when, I don't lose track of time here. But other railroads may have done, I'm sure other railroads did essentially the same. The cabooses had a desk, and it had 2 chairs and a desk to easily seat two men. So the swing brakeman and the conductor would sit at this desk. The brakeman would read off his car check that he had made on the train in the yard, read off the initial and number of the car, and the conductor would check his bill, and then he would put in his train book the initial and number, also the contents and destination. Now, the destination was not written out. In other words, you didn't have to write San Francisco. San Francisco was just a big goose egg. Los Angeles was 984. El Paso was 1216. At that time, I could give you the milepost number of any station on the Southern Pacific's line between San Francisco and El Paso, and even those like N something or another was down to Tucson, because that was what the brakeman would do. And also on downgrades, why the entire crew with the train, well, needless to mention, when I say crew, I mean train crew. Let's leave the engineer and firemen out of this. They don't do that kind of stuff. But on grades, going down grade, all the train crew except the conductor and the rear brakeman. The rear brakeman was back there because he had the flag. And so the swing brakeman would really take over his part. Now on flat ground in California, of course I'm speaking, you had to have a brakeman for every 25 cars, which that we come into the fourth brakeman. And if there were any grades, on fifth, they had a fifth brakeman that was called extra. But the fourth brakeman was part of the regular crew. In other words, he always went with the assigned crew. And so when going down grade, why everyone, as I say, except the conductor and the rear brakeman, would have to ride outside. Now sometimes this got a little chilly. I think the coldest place that riding outside was up around Palmdale and Lancaster, because on a real cold morning, because the wind, I don't know, it would really whistle across there, and nobody knew what wind chill factor was, but up there. Going down into, going from Beaumont into Indio, we had a kind of a little amusing thing in a way. Of course there, why any train of any length, they had the sixth brakeman, because almost all trains had six brakemen. But going up across the pass at Beaumont over the San Gorgonio Pass, why you'd be out on top of these cars with the wind blowing and sometimes the snow falling, and it'd really be cold. Well, then you get down to Indio in mid-morning, and you'd still be wearing all these heavy clothes. And so you'd go into a cafe there for breakfast, and maybe the temperature would be up by 90 or more by then. And so at that time, of course, we didn't have as many people traveling all over the country. I mean, it was actually, if you went from the East Coast to the West Coast by automobile then, it was quite unusual. So you did have just a few stragglers from far off coming in, and they didn't know anything about our extremes of temperature between up on the pass and down on the desert and so forth. And so here would come these group of a half a dozen people or more in there, were wearing parkas and all this stuff like they were dressed for the Arctic. But now here's the sun shining brightly out there, and if not warm, not hot weather, at least warm weather,